Now, we're going to have a look at exactly the steps that I do to recognize phonological dyslexia. And there are other ways of doing this. If you took your child to a psychologist or an educational psychologist, they're going to have a lot more steps. They're also going to take a lot longer. But let me walk you through the exact steps that I do when I'm looking for phonological dyslexia. The first thing I look for is the child successful in other areas of learning? So that struggling to read and write well is actually a surprise. Now, the key thing here in picking up phonological dyslexia is this. If you're working with a child who struggles with reading and writing, but then they also struggle with maths and they also struggle with science and history and sport, then it's probably not dyslexia. It's probably not phonological dyslexia. It's probably just a child with a range of some other sort of learning difficulties. Now, on the other hand, if you've got a child who's doing really quite well in maths, they're doing really quite well in understanding difficult scientific concepts, but when it comes to reading properly, then the child's reading skills and writing skills are just terrible, then that is an indicator of phonological dyslexia, because you've narrowed down that this child's issues, it's not with learning, it's with reading, it's with writing. And obviously, if the child's struggling with reading, then their writing will be poor. So that's one thing. Another thing that I check straight away is, are the words staying still when the child is trying to read on white paper? Now, this has got to be the most straightforward, the most overlooked thing that we could be checking out in schools. Now remember, if the words are appearing to move on the page, then that indicates visual stress, also known as scotopic sensitivity or Irlen syndrome. It doesn't indicate phonological dyslexia at all. So if you've got a whole heap of children's books that have got lots of text on different colours of paper, and if you've got that sort of book, which is not hard to track down, you just pop down the library and there's heaps of them, then you can have a child stare at text on different colours of paper other than white. And you can find out, well, do the words stay still or do they not? You know, it's very easy to find that out. And then when you compare how the child reads on different colours of paper compared to how they read on white, there's often a difference. And it's really straightforward. Really straightforward. You just have the child stare at a point in the middle of the page. Maybe it's a word, maybe it's a letter. And you ask the child, what are the words doing on the page? And often for a child on white paper, they'll say things like, oh, the words are shaking, or the words are slightly moving, or they're jiggling around a bit, or maybe the words are fading away. And then you just get out your book that's got text on different colours of paper, and you'll find that usually there's a colour or two that stop the words from moving. Okay, so that's something else that I systematically check out when I'm told that a child has dyslexia, because often it's not. Often it's visual stress. Now, another thing that I would check out for any child to recognise do they not have phonological dyslexia is, can the child pull words apart and put them back together again in their head? This is really summing up phonological dyslexia in a nutshell. Basically, the issue with phonological dyslexia is that when children are seeing letters, their brain is not instantly recognising what sounds those letters represent. So you can check this out with things like this. You can ask them the word space, S-P-A-C-E. The word space, what word would that be without the S? And obviously the child should say it's pace. But if it takes them a long time to process that, then that's an indicator of phonological dyslexia. What about the word split? S-P-L-I-T. The word split without the L. What word is that? Well, they should be able to tell you straight away. It's spit, or very quickly should be able to tell that to you. If it takes them, 4 or 5 seconds to tell you that, then that's not ideal. That's a very slow processing of those letters. So that's telling you, oh, maybe phonological dyslexia is there. Or another one is, what about the word shame, S-H-A-M-E, but replacing the M with a K? What word would that be? And if I was to ask you, what's the word shame if you replace the M with the K, it might take you a moment, but you should be fairly quick to work it out, because you're actually pulling apart words and playing with the letters in your head. You're visualizing it in your head. And that's something that children with phonological dyslexia are very slow on. So that's something else I always check out. Another thing worth checking is, can the child recognize compound words? Because this is a good way of checking that the child has the skill of pulling words apart, putting them back together. So compound words like sailboat, sunflower, dragonfly, fireworks. Often children with phonological dyslexia, they're not seeing the compound words as two distinct words rolled into one. They're sort of trying to sound out the whole word. Make sure that's not about their reading issue. Make sure that you're actually checking something that's appropriate for their ability. But compound words can be a bit of a giveaway. If a child's just not recognizing them, again, that's an indicator of some form of basically phonological dyslexia. Another thing that you've really got to check out is, and this is vital, this is such a giveaway sometimes, can the child read nonsense words? Can the child read made up words? Very important. Children with phonological dyslexia tend to read a lot from their knowledge of sight words. You know, that list of words that we train kids in kindergarten or year one, the most common words. Often you find children with phonological dyslexia just doing most of their reading from words that they are recognising because they've seen before. So rather than decoding words, and by that I mean sounding words out, their main strategy is to just hope that they instantly recognise them. So when you've got a made up word, a word that's not real, that you've just created in front of a child and they've never seen that word before, then they're forced to sound out the word because it's obviously not in their sight word bank because it didn't exist until you just put it in front of them. And that shows whether or not they've got the skills of sounding words out. Some good words like that, I mean, you can just make up your own word. I mean, I'm just sitting here, made up a word called spukos, S-P-U-K-O-S, or earthod, E-R-T-H-O-D, or bacopal, you know, B-A-C-O-P-A-L. They're just examples of made up words, and you can use these sort of words to really check, does a child have the ability to sound out these words? It shouldn't take them too long to sound them out. You know, if it's taking them a lot longer than it should take a child of their age, again, that's an indicator of phonological dyslexia. Something else to have a look at is the child appearing to read words but getting the letters in the wrong order? So a couple of examples of this. Say the word spirit. Are they reading spirit as sprint or vice versa? What about the word accept, E-X-C-E-P-T? If they're reading the word accept as expect, well, again, they've got all the letters, but they've put them in the wrong order. Or a word like split, if they read split as spilt, then it's the same thing. Or reserve, if they read the word reserve as reverse, same thing. Now, pretty much, they'll usually get the first letter and the last letter spot on when they're getting these words right. It'll be the middle letters that get jumbled around. But if this is happening often or noticeably often, then that is a very strong indicator of phonological dyslexia. Another thing to have a look at is, does a biological parent have phonological dyslexia? Because it so often runs in families. So if you've got a child and they're struggling with their reading, and then, you know, mum or dad says, oh yeah, so-and-so, the parent, they can hardly read a book to save themselves. You know, they just struggle so much with reading, always have. They've clearly got phonological dyslexia, and sometimes those parents have even been diagnosed as having phonological dyslexia. Then that's something else to take into account, because it's really, really common that when a parent has phonological dyslexia, then so will the child. So you look at those things, and basically, just a quick recap, you're looking, is the child successful in most other areas of learning, but then just struggling with their reading and therefore their writing, and is that a surprise? Okay, that's one indicator. Another was, are the words staying still on the page when the child's reading on white paper? Because if the words are moving, then that's not phonological dyslexia, that's visual stress. It's possible to have them both at the same time, but from my experience, I haven't seen that much. Usually, if it's visual stress, it's visual stress, deal with that, and the rest falls into place. Another thing to look for was, can the child pull words apart and put them back together again? Another thing we look at is, can the child recognise compound words easily? And then another one was, can the child read nonsense words, made up words? Okay, you don't need to use my made up words. You can make up your own, be original, not hard at all. Another one was, is the child appearing to read the words but with the right sounds in the wrong order? Things like spirit as sprint or accept as expect. And then the other thing to look for is, do one of the parents have phonological dyslexia? Because if they do, well, you know, it's a lot more likely that child will have it. Now, with phonological dyslexia, it's not always a straightforward yes or no. You know, there's a range with phonological dyslexia from mild to medium to severe. And there are also a lot of other factors at play, such as a child's age and how much exposure they've had to books when they were young. And from my experience, I'd say that if a child has phonological dyslexia, then the child should have clearly struggled on at least half of these activities, surprisingly struggled for their age. But usually more than half. If in doubt, if you're looking at a child with these activities and, you know, you just got some doubt, you think, maybe it's not phonological dyslexia. If you're in doubt, then it's either not phonological dyslexia, go with that intuition, or It is, but it's very mild. And if it's very mild, then you need to look at other possibilities to work out why the child is not progressing well at school. And in that sort of situation, you don't want to be all focused on phonological dyslexia if that's not what it is, you know. So maybe chat with another teacher at your school. There's always a teacher or two at your school who have been living probably almost as long, you know, as can be, and who've just been teaching for that long. It's not funny. Often teaching for longer than you've been alive. Go and ask them, you know, here's what I'm seeing. What are your thoughts on that? They can be a real wealth of knowledge.